The smoke from the 3 sticks of incense I had just placed on Mylan's altar had not yet dissipated. It drifted, curling into the thick air of the late autumn afternoon, carrying the familiar scent of sandalwood and the coldness of a year lived without her. 1 year. 365 days, each one as long as a single, unending brushstroke across a vast, empty expanse of rice paper. I sat at the Zeitenwood table where she used to do her embroidery, my fingers unconsciously tracing the polished grain. In the courtyard, the old osmanthus tree we planted as newlyweds was shedding its last golden leaves, which rustled to the ground like a final, weary sigh. I had thought, at least for this one day, Wang Bin would come home, not for me, but for his mother. I had prepared a small offering of food, all of Mylan's favorite dishes. I had thought he would return, light an incense stick for his mother, sit down with me for a cup of tea, and we would share a moment of silence in her memory. Silence, sometimes, is the only way for 2 men who no longer know what to say to each other to share the same roof. But the sound that shattered the stillness of this old alley was not the familiar shuffle of Wang Bin's footsteps. It was the roar of engines, the screech of metal, and the clamor of many voices. I frowned, stood up, and walked into the courtyard. The crimson gate of our Sihei Yuan, the gate that had stood against the wind and rain for 3 generations of the Wang family, was shuddering violently. I opened the gate, and the storm broke. Wang Bin stood there, but not alone. He wore a sleek, expensive suit, his leather shoes polished to a mirror shine, his hair held stiff with gel. His face held no trace of remembrance. Only impatience, and a chilling, unfamiliar hardness. Behind him stood another man in a suit, holding a briefcase, undoubtedly a lawyer. But what made the blood freeze in my veins was what stood behind them. 2 colossal yellow excavators, and a team of workmen in uniforms, brandishing sledgehammers and crowbars. "Bin?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "What is this?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze swept past me, into the courtyard, at the old osmanthus tree, at the intricately carved window frames, not with the fondness of a returning son, but with the cold eye of an appraiser. "Father," he finally said, his tone as flat as a business report, "I've come to settle things. Everything has been arranged." The lawyer beside him took a step forward, opening his leather briefcase. "Mr. Wang," he said, his voice slick as oil, "we have here the signed contract with the Tianlong Real Estate Group. This property will be demolished to make way for a luxury commercial complex, the new Forbidden City. All formalities have been completed." My ears were ringing. Demolished? Commercial complex? These sharp modern words stabbed at my mind like shards of broken glass. Completed? No one consulted me. Wang Bin let out a short, dismissive laugh, a dry sound utterly devoid of warmth. "Father, you're old. You can't keep clinging to this dilapidated wreck. Market value, do you understand? I'm providing you with a better future. A luxury apartment in a new development, with professional care. The compensation is more than enough for you to live out your days in comfort." "This is my home," I growled, feeling a hot fury begin to build in my chest. "It was your mother's home." "It was," Wang Bin retorted, his patience wearing thin. "Now it's an asset that needs to be optimized." He gestured to the lawyer, who produced another document. "This is a preliminary power of attorney, bearing your signature, authorizing your son, Mr. Wang Bin, to act on your behalf in initial negotiations. On this basis, we proceeded with the subsequent steps." He held the paper out to me. I looked at the bottom corner. There was my signature, Wang Weiguo. But it wasn't. The strokes were similar, but the spirit was absent. The final downward stroke was too sharp, too hurried, lacking the chenjua, the calm deliberation that I had cultivated over a lifetime. It was a shameless forgery. "I never signed this," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You've just forgotten," Wang Bin said, his tone patronizing, as if speaking to a child. "Your memory isn't what it used to be. In any case, it's settled. Father, please don't make this difficult." He turned to the workman. "Get ready." "Stop," I shouted, stepping in front of him. "Today is the anniversary of your mother's death. You cannot do this." A flicker of hesitation crossed Wang Bin's eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a ruthless resolve. "It's precisely because it's her anniversary that I want to resolve this quickly. Mother would understand. She always wanted what was best for the family." He looked me straight in the eye, and for a moment, I no longer saw my son. I saw a stranger with an insatiable greed. "Father, if you don't cooperate, my lawyers will have to take measures. They can prove you are no longer mentally competent to manage your own affairs. Do you want it to end like that?" The threat hung in the air, as cold as a blade. I looked past him at the excavators, 2 iron beasts, waiting to devour my home, to devour my memories. I looked back towards Mylan's altar through the open doorway, the incense smoke now almost gone. She was there, smiling gently in the black and white photograph, but it seemed her eyes were on me, pleading. I stepped back, the strength of a 70-year-old man suddenly deserting me. I had lost to the very son that Mylan and I had poured our lives into raising. Good, Wang Bin said, taking my silence as consent. He turned and waved his hand. Start with the east wall. The engine roared to life. One of the excavators began to raise its massive iron bucket. I closed my eyes, unwilling to witness the desecration. The east wall, where Mylan had planted a bougainvillea vine, where every summer the flowers bloomed in a riot of purple. In that moment of despair, I heard a voice. Not Wang Bin's, not the lawyer's. It was Mylan's voice, clear in my mind, a memory from long ago when we were renovating the study. Waiguo, she had said, never trust what you see on the surface. The most precious things are always hidden more deeply. My eyes flew open. The study. Without a word, I turned and strode back into the house, ignoring Wang Bin's calls from behind me. I went straight to the study in the west wing, the room where Mylan and I had spent countless quiet afternoons. I slammed the door shut and bolted it. The room was the same, filled with the mingled scents of old paper and ink. But today, it was no longer a sanctuary. It was my final battlefield. My trembling hands ran along the limewood bookshelves. What had Mylan said, hidden more deeply? My eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. And then I saw it. Behind the tallest bookshelf, the one that held the old, seldom-used dictionaries, there was a small gap between the back of the shelf and the wall, a gap no one would normally notice. The roar of the excavator in the courtyard was growing closer. I could hear Wang Bin pounding on the door. Father, open the door, don't do anything foolish. I ignored him. With all my strength, I pushed the bookshelf. It scraped and groaned across the floor. And then, I saw it. Not a safe, but a section of the wall where the plaster was a slightly different shade. I tapped it lightly. The sound was hollow. I searched for a latch, a seam, and I found a single brick that could be pressed. The brick gave way. A small section of the wall slowly swung open, revealing a dark cavity. Inside, covered in a thin layer of dust, was a black lacquer box, inlaid with a mother-of-pearl design of two phoenixes. My heart pounded in my chest. I reached in with a trembling hand and took hold of the box. It was heavier than I expected. At that exact moment, the study door burst open. Wang Bin and two workmen stormed in. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled, his eyes fixed on the box in my hands. "Give that to me. It must be the gold Mother hid away." He lunged forward, but I'd already stepped back, clutching the box to my chest as if it were my own life. "No," I said, and my voice was no longer trembling. It was firm, steely, a voice I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. "This is not for you." In his astonished eyes, I knew the battle had only just begun. And this time, I was not fighting alone. I had Mylan with me. The lacquer box sat on the desk, heavy not just with the weight of wood and varnish, but with the gravity of a decade-old secret. Wang Bin stood frozen, the initial surprise on his face giving way to a mixture of suspicion and avarice. He stared at the box, then at me, his eyes narrowing as if trying to calculate the value of something he hadn't yet seen. The two workmen hovered awkwardly behind him, unsure whether to advance or retreat. "An old box," Wang Bin muttered, his voice laced with scorn. "You think this can stop me, Father? Even if it holds the imperial seal of the Qianlong Emperor, it changes nothing. The contract is signed." He was partly right. A box, no matter how precious, could not stand against the power of stamped documents and the growling machines outside. But I knew Mylan. She was not a woman who would leave behind something useless. She was far more practical than I. Her wisdom was not found in poetry, but in the precise stitches of her embroidery, in her ability to see to the heart of a matter. I didn't answer him. My hand glided over the box's glossy surface. The mother-of-pearl phoenixes shimmered under the room's dim light, so vivid they seemed ready to take flight. There was no lock. I turned the box over, searching for a hidden clasp. Mylan loved such intricate things. I found it a tiny, leaf-shaped piece of inlay that could slide. I pushed it gently. A soft click echoed in the tense room. The lid sprang open. Wang Bin held his breath, leaning forward. But the contents were not the gold and jewels he had imagined. There was no jewelry, no stacks of cash. There was only a sheaf of yellowed papers, an old-fashioned bronze key, and a carefully sealed letter. Disappointment washed over Wang Bin's face. "Scraps of paper," he blurted, then laughed. "Unbelievable. I thought Mother would have left something more valuable. It seems she was just like you after all, full of useless sentiment." He turned, waving to the workmen. "Carry on. Tear down the east wall for me." "Wait," I called out. This time, there was a newfound confidence in my voice, a resolve that surprised even me. I picked up the letter. On the envelope, In Mylan's elegant script were 2 words. For Waiguo. I slowly broke the seal, ignoring Wang Bin's impatient glare. Inside was a thin sheet of rice paper, the faint scent of old ink still clinging to it. Waiguo. My husband. I read the words silently. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the storm I most feared has arrived. Do not be sad, and do not be angry with Wang Bin. His greed is not entirely his fault. It is a product of these times, and perhaps partly our fault for sheltering him too much. But to shelter is not to surrender. I spent the last 5 years of my life researching this house, not for its material value, but for the spirit it holds. These papers are copies of my research. Our home was once the residence of a Qing dynasty censor, a man named Lin Ziqian. He was an official of great integrity who was framed by the court. Before his downfall, he left a secret within these very walls, a secret that can protect it forever. Do not confront Wang Bin head-on. You are no match for his brute force. Use wisdom. This key is for a small house in the city of Dali, in Yunnan province. A quiet place with sun and flowers, where you can live out your years in peace if you choose. I bought it long ago. And this is the phone number for A Jing. She was my former student, the girl I helped years ago. She now manages the house and a small art studio there. She is trustworthy. Call her. She will know what to do. And finally, Waiguo, trust in what you have dedicated your life to. The power of paper and ink is not confined to billion-yuan contracts. It lies in history, in truth. Find the crimson ink wall. It will give you the answer. I folded the letter, my heart pounding. The crimson ink wall. A Jing. Dali. The pieces of a puzzle began to fall into place, forming a plan Mai Lan had laid out for me. She had not left me alone. She had given me a path, a weapon. I looked up at Wang Bin. You will not demolish this house. He burst out laughing. Are you delirious, father? The excavators are outside. The lawyers are here. Everything is on my side. You are mistaken, I said calmly. I picked up Mylan's sheaf of research papers. They were copies from the city archives, old newspaper clippings, genealogical records. This house is not merely a piece of real estate. It may be a historical relic that requires preservation. Wang Bin's lawyer, who had been observing silently, frowned. Sir, according to the land registry, this is private property, not on the city's list of protected heritage sites. The registry may not be up to date, I said, flipping through a page. Mai Lan found evidence that this was the residence of Lin Ziqian, an important historical figure, and there may be undiscovered artifacts within. Wang Bin lost his patience. Enough. This is all nonsense. I don't have time for these games. He turned to his lawyer. Proceed. If there are any issues, we'll deal with them later. Money can solve anything. The lawyer looked hesitant. Demolishing a potential historical site was a risky move, even with powerful connections. He glanced at me, then at Wang Bin. Mr. Wang, perhaps we should be cautious. If what the old gentleman says is true, this could lead to major trouble with the Cultural Heritage Bureau. What trouble? Wang Bin roared. I have connections. Money solves everything. At that moment, I did something I had not planned. I grabbed the heavy inkstone from my desk and with a powerful swing, hurled it through the open window. It flew across the courtyard and smashed on the ground directly in front of the advancing excavator's treads, shattering into pieces. Black ink splattered across the flagstones like a bleeding wound. Everyone was stunned. The excavator driver slammed on the brakes. If you dare take one more step, I said, my voice hard as iron, I will set myself on fire right here in this study. And I will leave behind a letter written in my own blood, stating that my own son forced me to my death to seize our ancestral home. Let's see what the press, the government, and your investors have to say about that. A dead silence fell over the room. Even Wang Bin was speechless. He knew I was not bluffing. A calligrapher who had cherished honor and integrity his entire life, when cornered, was capable of the unthinkable. The scandal of forcing his own father to suicide would be an indelible stain, enough to destroy the entire career he was so desperately trying to build. The lawyer quickly pulled Wang Bin's arm. Mr. Wang, we can't. The risk is too great. We should pause. Let's verify everything first. Wang Bin ground his teeth, staring at me with murderous eyes. He knew he had lost today's battle. Fine, he hissed. You win this round. But don't think this is over. He pointed a finger at my face. I'll be back. And when I return, you'll have nothing left to threaten me with. With that, he spun around and stormed out of the study, followed by his lawyer and the workmen. The sound of the engines faded away, returning the alley to its original quiet. I stood alone in the disheveled room. My strength seemed to drain away. I sank into my chair, still clutching Mylan's letter. I had won, but it was only a temporary victory. I knew Wang Bin would not give up. But now, I was no longer afraid. I looked down at the bronze key and the phone number on the slip of paper. Mylan had given me a plan, an escape route, and most importantly, she had given me faith. I took a deep breath, the scent of ink and old paper filling my lungs. This was the scent of my life, the scent of the heritage I had to protect. I picked up my phone. It was time to call Dolly. It was time to begin my counterattack. The air in the study was still taut, a coiled spring, even after the noise had receded. I sat motionless for a long time, listening to my own heartbeat gradually return to its normal rhythm. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny golden sprites. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, but I knew nothing was the same. An invisible line had been crossed. War had been declared, not with words, but with the roar of an excavator and the silence of a shattered inkstone. My hand still trembled slightly as I picked up the phone. The screen lit up, displaying the string of numbers Mylan had so carefully written down. A Jing, a name I didn't know, yet it held all my hope. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice, and dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, clear and gentle, like the sound of a flowing stream. Hello? Excuse me, may I ask if this is Miss A. Jing? Yes, this is she. May I ask who is calling? The voice had a distinct southern accent, soft and pleasant. This is Wang Weiguo, I said slowly. I am Mylan's husband. The other end of the line fell silent. The silence stretched for a few seconds, but I could feel the shock through it. Then, a Jing's voice came again, this time with a slight tremor of emotion. Teacher Wang, I never expected. Shifu, she... I know, I interrupted gently, not wanting to reopen the wound. I'm calling because Mylan left me a few things. She said I could trust you. Yes, of course, a Jing replied instantly, the conviction in her voice warming me. Anything at all. Shifu was my benefactor. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am today. I briefly told her what had just happened. The excavators, the contract, Wang Bin's threats. As I spoke, I heard a Jing's sharp intake of breath on the other end. A gasp of anger. How could he? She exclaimed. On the very anniversary of Shifu's passing, he has changed, I said, my voice heavy. A Jing, Mylan mentioned a house in Dali and a key. Yes, that's right. A lovely little house near Erhai Lake, tucked away in a quiet alley. Shifu bought it a few years ago, said it was for your retirement. I still go over regularly to clean and tend to the flower garden she planted. Everything is ready. Hearing those words, an invisible weight lifted from my shoulders. Mylan had prepared everything. She had not only given me a place to go, but a person to look after it, to keep the warmth of life from ever fading. Thank you, Ajing. I may need it soon. But first, I have work to do here. I need a lawyer, not the slick young type like Wang Bin's. I need someone who understands things, someone who respects what is right. Ajing was quiet for a moment, thinking. Teacher Wang, Shifu had asked me to look into a few things for her before. She mentioned an old friend of yours, a lawyer Zheng Yongnian. She said if anything happened, he was the only one who could be trusted. Old Zheng. The name struck my memory like a flash of lightning. Zheng Yongnian, my closest friend from youth, the one with whom I had ground ink and debated poetry. We had lost touch for decades after he moved south, then returned to Beijing to open a tiny, obscure law office, handling minor civil cases. People said he was old-fashioned, out of touch with the times. But I knew old Zheng had integrity, and integrity, in this day and age, was a luxury. I understand. Thank you, Ajing. You've helped me immensely. Please don't say that. I will wait for your call. Dali will always welcome you. I hung up, feeling as though I had found an ally, a solid anchor in the storm. I looked around the study, which had been both my fortress and my battlefield. It was time to clean up. I gathered the fragments of the broken inkstone, placing them carefully in a box. Perhaps one day I would try to piece it back together, knowing the cracks would remain forever, like the rift between Wang Bin and me. Then, I pushed the bookshelf back into place, concealing the secret cavity. The lacquer box and its contents I stored in the bottom drawer of my writing desk, where I kept my most precious calligraphy seals. Mylan's secret had to be kept safe. The next morning, I put on an old overcoat and a cap and walked to old Zheng's office. It was located in an old residential complex, a world away from the gleaming glass office towers downtown. The wooden sign was faded, bearing just 3 characters, Lawyer Zheng's office. I pushed the door open. The room was small and somewhat cluttered, piled high with case files. Old Zheng sat behind his desk, wearing a pair of thick reading glasses engrossed in a document. His hair was completely white, his back slightly stooped, but his eyes behind the glasses were still sharp and bright. He looked up at the sound of the bell on the door. He squinted at me for a long moment. "Waiguo?" he called out, his voice filled with disbelief. "Yongnian," I replied, a sad smile touching my lips. "It's been too long." He stood up, walked around the desk, and embraced me. The hug of old friends, which needed no words. Come, sit," he said, pulling me towards an old sofa. "Let's have some tea. What brings you to this dusty corner of mine?" I didn't beat around the bush. I told him everything. About my land, about Wang Bin, the contract, the forged signature, and even the lacquer box. I only omitted the part about the censor's secret and the crimson ink wall. That was my final trump card. I had to keep it to myself. Old Jung listened intently, his expression growing more and more solemn. He didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, he sat in thoughtful silence for a long time, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the arm of the sofa. "That boy, Wang Bin," he sighed. "I still remember him as a child, so bright and clever. These times, they have made him into this." He looked at me, his gaze sharp. "Waiguo, what do you want to do? Do you want to sue him for forgery, or do you just want to keep the house?" "I want to keep the house," I answered without hesitation. "It's all that's left of my land and me. I don't want to send my own son to prison, even if he deserves it." Old Jung nodded in approval. "I understand. That is the Wang Waiguo I know. Very well. We will not attack head-on. We will defend, and we will counterattack with intelligence." He stood up, went to his desk, and pulled out a stack of paper. "First, we need to send legal notices to Wang Bin's company, the Tian Long Group, and that young lawyer. The content: a formal declaration that you do not consent to the sale, that the power of attorney is a forgery, and that any action related to the demolition of the house is illegal. Demand they cease all activities immediately." "Will it be effective?" "It won't stop Wang Bin," Old Jung said, "but it will make his partners hesitate. No large corporation wants to be entangled in a messy legal dispute, especially one with undertones of family ethics. It will buy us time." He began to draft the documents. His handwriting, though not calligraphy, was clear and decisive. "Second, we need to gather evidence. Anything that proves you are of sound mind and perfectly capable of managing your own affairs. Utility bills you've paid yourself, recent health checkups, testimonies from neighbors. We must be one step ahead, in case Wang Bin actually files for guardianship." I nodded, feeling a sense of clarity forming in my mind. Mylan's plan and Old Jung's experience were coming together, creating a formidable defense. "And finally," Old Jung said, looking up at me, "you must prepare yourself mentally. This will be a long and draining battle. It will test not only your strength, but also your heart. Are you ready?" I looked out the window where the last rays of the day were gilding the old tiled roofs. I thought of Mylan, of my promise to her. "I am ready," I said, my voice firm. More than ever. Leaving Old Jung's office, I no longer felt like a solitary old man weathering a storm. I now had a compass, Mylan's plan, and a navigator, Old Jung. My boat, however old, finally had a course. That afternoon I set about following Old Jung's instructions. I rummaged through drawers, collecting all the electricity, water, and gas bills I had personally paid over the past year. These small, mundane slips of paper, which I usually paid little mind to, had now become crucial evidence of my competence. I found my regular health checkup records. The results were good, showing no signs of memory loss or confusion. I even went next door to see my neighbor, Mr. Lee, who had lived beside me for over 40 years, and asked him to write a letter testifying that I lived alone and managed my own affairs perfectly well. Mr. Lee, a stern and upright veteran, immediately wrote a letter by hand, his words forceful, expressing his outrage at Wang Bin's behavior. These actions, though small, were immensely significant. They were like grinding the ink before creating a major piece of calligraphy. It required patience and meticulous care, so that when the brush was finally set to paper, the strokes would be steady and powerful. The next day, the legal notices drafted by Old Jung were sent out by registered mail, one copy to Wang Bin's office, one to the headquarters of the Tian Long Group, and one to that young lawyer. I imagined the uniformed couriers, solemnly delivering the brown envelopes that contained words as cold and sharp as steel. The ink was cold, but the contents of those papers were as hot as fire. I did not have to wait long for a reaction. That evening, as I was watering the orchids in the courtyard, my phone rang. It was Wang Bin's number. I took a breath, let it ring a few more times, then answered. "What kind of game are you playing, Father?" Wang Bin's voice roared from the other end, without any greeting. "What's with these ridiculous letters? You think some washed-up old lawyer can scare me?" "It is not a threat, Bin," I replied, my voice calm. "It is the truth. I am not selling the house, period. The truth is that you are obstructing my business. Do you have any idea that because of your letter Tianlong called me? They're demanding a project halt to reevaluate legal risks. You're ruining everything. I am only protecting what is mine, and what belonged to your mother. Don't you dare bring Mother into this, he yelled. Mother was a practical woman. She would never have accepted living in a rotting hovel when she could have had a fortune instead. It is you, with your outdated ideas, who is clinging to the past. I remained silent, letting his rage burn itself out. Arguing with someone in a frenzy is like trying to write calligraphy on water. Futile. Listen to me, Wang Bin continued, his voice lowering slightly but still laced with menace. I'll give you one last chance. Withdraw those letters. Sign the official contract. Everything will go back to normal. If not, I won't hold back anymore. I will prove to the entire world just how senile you've become. I'll give you a piece of advice too, Bin, I said slowly. Come home, light a belated incense stick for your mother, and rethink what you are doing. This gate is still open, but not for excavators to enter. I hung up before he could say another word. Putting the phone down, I looked at the orchids. My Lan loved orchids. She said they were like noble gentlemen, unassuming in appearance but possessing a noble spirit. To cultivate a beautiful orchid required patience, meticulous care, and most importantly, a refusal to rush. I felt I needed to be the same. The next few days passed in a tense quiet. There were no more calls from Wang Bin, but I knew this was just the calm before another storm. Through my neighbor Mr. Li, I learned that my daughter-in-law, Li, had been visiting the neighborhood. She didn't come to my house, but went from door to door, bearing expensive gift baskets. She wept, telling stories of her aging father-in-law, whose memory was failing, who was stubbornly refusing to move to a better place where his children could care for him. She painted a picture of filial children being thwarted by a confused and difficult old man. A few of the more credulous neighbors believed her. But most, those who had lived here for decades, who had watched My Lan and me build this home, were skeptical. They knew me, they knew My Lan, and they knew Wang Bin, and how he had changed since he became wealthy. Old Zheng called me, informing me that Wang Bin's lawyer had sent a reply. They insisted the power of attorney was valid and declared they would initiate legal proceedings to determine my capacity for civil conduct. The battle had officially moved to the legal front. Don't worry, Old Zheng said over the phone. This is a move I anticipated. We are prepared. Let them do it. The court is not a place for empty talk. They need evidence, and our evidence is far more solid. That night, I couldn't sleep. I brewed a pot of puree tea, the kind My Lan said held the taste of time, and sat in the study. I opened the lacquer box and took out her research documents. I read every page, trying to understand what she had discovered. The documents revealed that Lin Zekian had not only lived here, but had turned this place into a secret library, storing rare books and calligraphy works that were banned by the court at the time. My Lan had speculated that to protect these treasures, he must have created hidden mechanisms and secret compartments within the house's structure. Then, a detail in her notes caught my eye. A small annotation in the margin of a floor plan of the house. West wall, study, second layer of plaster, crimson ink. The crimson ink wall. She had found it, or at least, a clue to it. My heart beat faster. I stood up and walked to the west wall of the study. The wall was smooth and unremarkable, adorned only by one of my landscape paintings. I knocked on its surface. The sound was solid. No sign of a cavity. Second layer of plaster. Crimson ink. What did she mean? I suddenly remembered My Lan's words in her letter. Trust in what you have dedicated your life to. What had I dedicated my life to? Calligraphy, paper, ink, brush. An idea sparked in my mind. Perhaps the secret was not structural, not a hidden cavity or a secret door. Perhaps it was in the wall itself. I needed a tool, not a hammer, not a crowbar, something more delicate. I remembered the antique restoration kit I kept in the storeroom. It contained a small, thin, and sharp trowel. The next morning, as the first light of dawn touched the courtyard, I began my work. I carefully took down the painting. Then, using the trowel, I began to gently scrape a corner of the wall hidden behind the bookshelf. Thin layers of plaster fell away like fine dust. The first layer, off-white. I continued to scrape, slowly, carefully. And then, I saw it. Beneath the white plaster, another color began to emerge. Not the gray of brick, but a deep, rich red, the color of the crimson ink used for seals. And against that red background, faint outlines of ancient characters began to appear. I held my breath, my hand trembling. I had found it. The crimson ink wall, My Lan's secret, Lin Zekian's legacy, and my ultimate weapon. This war, I would surely win. Discovering the crimson ink wall was like finding an underground spring in the middle of a desert. It didn't quench my thirst immediately, but it gave me the unshakable certainty that life was still ahead. I carefully covered the scraped area, rehung the painting, and acted as if nothing had happened. This was my trump card, and it would only be played at the most decisive moment. In the following days, Wang Bin and Li Li launched a new offensive, one that used not excavators or hammers but venomous words and sophisticated psychological tactics. A wind began to blow from the very walls of our neighborhood, carrying whispers and rumors sown with deliberate intent. Li Li became the face of this campaign. With her elegant appearance and sweet voice, she played the role of the perfectly filial daughter-in-law. She frequented the neighborhood, not to visit me, but to confide in the neighbors. She told them that her father-in-law, after the shock of losing his wife, had become paranoid. He imagined people were trying to harm him, to steal his house. He locked himself away, refusing the care of his children. She even shed a few crocodile tears, saying how heartbroken she and her husband were to see me like this, only wanting to move me to a better place, but I wouldn't understand. These words, like toxic seeds, began to sprout in some people's minds. Mrs. Zhang, who sold tofu at the end of the alley, started looking at me with pity. The neighborhood children no longer dared to run into my courtyard to play, likely warned by their parents. I could feel a distance forming, an invisible wall being erected around me. Wang Bin acted more directly. One morning, I received a call from a hospital, informing me that your son has scheduled a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation for you. I refused in anger. Shortly after, a private ambulance screeched to a halt in front of my gate. Two medics in white coats got out, stating they had received a request to assist an elderly patient showing signs of instability. I had to call old Zheng immediately. He spoke to them over the phone in a stern, legalistic tone, and they quietly left. But the most painful blow was yet to come. A few days later, I discovered that the bank account where I received my pension had been frozen. I called the bank, and they informed me they had received a document from Wang Bin's lawyer, along with a preliminary diagnosis from some psychologist, suggesting I might not be competent to manage my finances. It took old Zheng a full day of work with the bank to lift the freeze. I began to feel the exhaustion. This battle was not just legal, it was wearing down my spirit. Wang Bin was trying to isolate me, to cut off all my resources and support, to prove that I was indeed helpless and in need of guardianship. I sat alone in the silent courtyard, watching the osmanthus leaves fall, and for the first time, a sliver of doubt crept in. Did I have the strength to see this through to the end? Just then, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number from Yunnan. I answered. Teacher Wang, it's a Jing. Her clear voice was like a stream of cool, fresh water. I heard, some unpleasant things have been happening in Beijing. How did you know? I have friends in the medical field. They heard rumors. I was so worried about you. I sighed and told her what Wang Bin and his wife had been doing. A Jing listened in silence. Teacher, she said after a moment, her voice firm, you can't stay there alone. You must come to Dali. Here, no one can bother you. You need a quiet place to rest and prepare for the next battle. Let Lawyer Zheng handle the legal fight. You need to take care of yourself. Her words made me think. Perhaps she was right. Staying in Beijing now meant constantly facing Wang Bin's psychological attacks. He wouldn't stop until I broke down. Leaving was not fleeing. Leaving was to preserve my strength, to change the battlefield, to regain the initiative. Shifu prepared everything, a Jing continued, as if reading my mind. She knew this day would come. The house here, the garden, my art studio, it's all part of her plan. Your coming here is not seeking refuge. It's returning to another home, another fortress that Shifu built for you. A fortress, yes. Milan had given me two fortresses. One in Beijing, holding the past and its secrets. One in Dali, holding the future and its peace. All right, I said. I will come. Wonderful. Just book your flight and leave the rest to me. The decision made, I felt a great sense of relief. I called old Zheng to inform him of my plan. He fully supported it. A good move, Wagwo, he said. You leave, and Wang Bin loses his direct target. He'll grow more impatient and might make mistakes. You rest easy. I'll handle things here. I booked a flight for the earliest departure in 2 days. I told no one, not even my neighbor, Mr. Li. I quietly packed a small suitcase with a few changes of clothes, my most precious set of ink brushes, and of course, Milan's research papers. The night before I left, I sat in the study once more. I didn't look at the crimson ink wall. Instead, I gazed at Milan's photograph on the desk. She was still smiling, her eyes gentle and all-knowing. Lan, I whispered. I have to leave this place for a while. Leave the home we built together. It was as if I heard her answer in the wind, a whisper from the ancient walls. Waiguo, a home is not the place we live. A home is where there is love and peace. You are not leaving, you are protecting. Go, and you will return, stronger. The next morning, while a thick fog still blanketed the alleys, I pulled my small suitcase and quietly locked the gate. I didn't look back. I knew this was not an escape. It was a journey to my second fortress, and the first step in my real counteroffensive. The wind was still blowing, but this time, I was the one setting its direction. The flight to Dali felt like a journey across space and time. When the plane landed at the small airport nestled among green mountains, I felt as if I had left behind not only the clamor of Beijing but also the anxieties that had weighed on me for weeks. The air here was clean, carrying the scent of grass and damp earth. The sky was unusually high and blue, unobstructed by skyscrapers or industrial haze. A Jing was waiting in the arrivals hall. She wore a simple indigo linen dress, her long black hair in a neat braid, her smile bright and warm. She was different from how I had imagined. She possessed a rustic beauty, an inner peace that radiated from her, a stark contrast to the polished, artificial facade of Lili. "Teacher Wang," she greeted me with a respectful bow, a gesture from a former student. "Was the flight tiring?" "I'm fine," I replied, feeling her sincerity. "Thank you for coming to meet me. Please, don't be formal. You are my teacher." She took the suitcase from my hand naturally. "Let's go home." Home. The word sounded so warm. We drove along a winding road, with the majestic Kangshan Mountains on one side, and the vast, sea-like Erhai Lake on the other. The house Milan had chosen was in an old village where time seemed to slow down. It was a small, traditional Bai-style house with white walls and blue-tiled roofs, featuring a small courtyard filled with flowers. "Here we are," a Jing said, opening the wooden gate. "Shifu said you liked quiet." I stepped into the courtyard. Golden sunlight, like honey, spilled over the stone steps. A bougainvillea vine was in full, glorious bloom, and in a corner, several pots of orchids stretched towards the sun. I could see the touch of Milan's care everywhere. The house was not large, but it was cozy and well-appointed. From the bedroom window, I could see a glittering corner of Erhai Lake. "Please get some rest," a Jing said. "I've prepared some food. My studio is just at the end of the alley. If you need anything, just call me." She left, giving me my space. I put down my suitcase and walked through the house, touching each object. Milan had prepared everything, from the Yunnan ceramic tea set on the table to my favorite books on the shelf. She had built a perfect sanctuary for me, a place where I could heal and recharge. For the first few days in Dali, I did nothing. I simply slept, read, made tea, and sat in the courtyard admiring the flowers. I turned off my Beijing phone, only keeping in touch with old Zheng through Ajing. I needed to detach myself from the battle, to let my mind grow still. Gradually, the nightmares of Wang Bin and the excavators became less frequent. My sleep grew deeper. Meanwhile, back in Beijing, the legal battle continued. Old Zheng regularly updated Ajing, who would then relay the news to me. Wang Bin, upon learning of my disappearance, had become furious. He and his lawyer had officially filed a petition with the court, requesting that I be declared incompetent and that he be appointed my legal guardian. Just as we predicted, old Zheng had said to Ajing over the phone, "The preliminary hearing will be next week. The court will summon both parties. Waiguo doesn't need to be there. I will represent him." On the day of the hearing, I sat by the shore of Erhai Lake, feeling a little restless. Though I trusted old Zheng, I couldn't help but worry. This was the first official confrontation in the eyes of the law. In the afternoon, a Jing came running, phone in hand. "It's lawyer Zheng." I took the phone. "Yongnian?" "Waiguo," old Zheng's voice sounded pleased. "Things went quite well. Just as I thought, their side has no concrete evidence." He recounted that during the hearing, Wang Bin's lawyer had presented a series of proofs of my senility, my refusal to see my son, my abandoning my home without a word, and that dubious preliminary diagnosis they had acquired. Old Zheng had calmly refuted each point. He presented the bills I had paid, my health records, and the letters of testimony from my longtime neighbors. As for my leaving Beijing, he argued that it was a citizen's personal freedom, that it was perfectly normal for me to travel and recuperate after the shock of losing my wife, and it could not be considered evidence of incapacity. That young lawyer was quite flustered, old Zheng said, a hint of irony in his voice. He could only repeat that your behavior was abnormal. The judge didn't seem convinced. Empty words carry no weight there. However, Wang Bin's side still had one card to play. They requested the court to order an independent forensic psychiatric evaluation for me. "This was unavoidable," old Zheng said, "and we will not refuse. Refusing would make us look like we're hiding something." I agreed with the court, on the condition that the evaluation must be conducted by a reputable medical panel appointed by the court, not by any single doctor. "I understand," I replied. "When do I have to go back?" "Not yet," old Zheng said. The court will issue a decision and send a summons. This process will take a few weeks. You continue to rest. Maintaining a calm and healthy state of mind is the best preparation for that evaluation. I hung up, feeling more relieved. We had not lost the first hearing. We had held our ground. The first echo from the stones of the law had shown that Wang Bin's foundation was not as solid as he thought. In the following days, I began to immerse myself in the life of Dali. A Jing took me to her art studio, a creative space for young people who loved folk art. I rediscovered the joy of holding a brush, teaching a few children the basic strokes of calligraphy. I strolled through the old town, drank tea with the local elders, and listened to their ancient stories. Life here, slow and simple, helped me find my balance. I was no longer a bitter and weary old man embroiled in a family dispute. I was Wang Waiguo, a calligrapher, a teacher, a man beginning a new chapter of his life. A week before the court-appointed evaluation, I returned to Beijing. I didn't inform Wang Bin. I quietly went back to my Yuan. The house was still there, waiting silently and patiently. Weeds had begun to sprout in the courtyard, but the bougainvillea was still blooming, and the orchids were green and healthy, thanks to Mr. Li watering them from time to time. I walked into the study. Everything was as I had left it. I went to the crimson ink wall and pressed my ear against it. I felt as if I could hear the echo of history, the whispers of the stones, of the characters that had lain dormant there for centuries. They were waiting. And so was I. I was ready for the final confrontation. This time, I had not only the law and evidence on my side, I also had the serenity of the Dali sky and the echo of ancient stones. Returning to Beijing, I felt a distinct change within myself. The chill of winter had begun to seep into the alleys, but my heart no longer felt the same icy dread. The journey to Dali had infused me with a warmth, a resilience from within. I no longer saw this Yuan as a lone fortress to be defended to the death, but as a legacy waiting to be awakened. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon. Wang Bin did not appear. Only his lawyer escorted me to the hospital. I calmly faced the evaluation panel, which consisted of 3 reputable doctors. They asked me a multitude of questions, ranging from my past and family life to my finances and recent decisions. I answered each one clearly and logically. I did not hide the pain of losing my wife, nor my disappointment in my son. But I emphasized that grief did not equate to insanity, and disappointment did not mean an inability to judge. I told them about the retirement plan in Dali that my wife and I had long cherished, explaining that my trip was to fulfill her last wish and to find peace, not an impulsive act of escape. When they asked about the sale of the house, I presented my case plainly. Doctors, that house is more than just bricks and mortar. It holds the memories of a lifetime. My son sees only the value of the land. I see the value of time. My refusal to sell is not an unwise decision, but a choice based on my values. The evaluation lasted over 2 hours. When I walked out of the room, old Zheng was already waiting. He looked at me, asked no questions, and simply nodded. We both knew that the truth had spoken for itself. The evaluation results were sent to the court a week later. The conclusion was unequivocal. The subject, Wang Waiguo, is of sound mind, possessing full capacity for civil conduct and the ability to manage his own assets. This was a devastating blow to Wang Bin's plan. His senile father card was now completely useless. Old Zheng informed me that the court had dismissed the guardianship petition. Legally, I had won a crucial battle, but I knew the war was not over. Wang Bin had lost in the court of law, but his greed had not. The contract with the Tianlong Group still existed, and he would not easily give up such a massive profit. I decided I needed a space to think. The next morning, I went to an old tea house near the Forbidden City, a place Mylan and I used to love. The tea house hadn't changed much. The same old wooden tables and chairs, the same calligraphy scrolls on the walls, and the same rich aroma of Tiguanyin tea. I ordered a pot of tea and sat at our usual corner table. I closed my eyes, and Mylan's image appeared before me, as clear as if she were sitting right across from me. What would she say now? What would she advise me to do? I suddenly remembered my promise to her, not just the promise to keep the house. It was a deeper promise, one we had nurtured together over the years. The promise to live a life of dignity and integrity, to never let money overshadow our core values. And the promise to raise Wang Bin to be a good man. That was it. I had been so focused on fighting against Wang Bin that I had forgotten he was still my son. Mylan had written in her letter, "Do not be angry with Wang Bin. It is partly our fault for sheltering him too much." Perhaps this battle was not just about keeping the house. Perhaps it was one last chance for me to teach Wang Bin a lesson not found in business textbooks, a lesson about roots, about heritage, about things that money cannot buy. The tea in my cup had grown cold, its taste sharp and bitter. But in that bitterness, I found a new resolve. I would no longer just defend. It was time to counterattack. Not with hatred, but with truth. I returned home, a plan already forming in my mind. I called old Zheng. "Yongnian," I said, "I need you to do something for me. Contact the Municipal Cultural Heritage Bureau. Not as my lawyer, but as a concerned citizen. Provide them with an anonymous tip about the potential existence of an important historical site at my address, related to the censor Lin Zekian." Old Zheng was silent for a moment on the other end. I knew he understood my intention. A risky move, Waiguo. If they get involved, the house may no longer be entirely yours. It could become state property. "I know," I replied, "but it is better for it to belong to the state, to be preserved and open for all to appreciate, than for it to become a soulless concrete block. Besides, this is the only way to render Wang Bin's contract absolutely worthless." "I understand," old Zheng said, his voice filled with admiration. "You have thought it through. I will do it immediately." After hanging up, I walked into the study. It was time to awaken the crimson ink wall. I would not use the small trowel this time. I needed an expert. I called A Jing and asked her to help me find a trustworthy antique restoration artisan in Beijing, someone who could handle old plaster without damaging what lay beneath. Mai Lan, with her network in the art world, would surely have known such a person. A Jing promised to make the call right away. Everything was in motion. The chess pieces were being moved into position. I didn't know what would happen when the veil of secrecy was lifted. Would Wang Bin be awakened? Or would he sink deeper into his rage? I didn't know. I only knew that I was doing the right thing, something Mai Lan would have smiled and approved of. I was fulfilling my promise to her. I brewed a new pot of tea. This time, it was no longer bitter. It had a sweet aftertaste, like the taste of a truth about to be revealed, of a burden about to be lifted. That night, I slept soundly, without dreams. The storm was coming, but my heart was calm. The following 2 weeks were a period of suffocating silence. After his defeat in court, Wang Bin no longer called or caused trouble. He seemed to have retreated into the shadows, perhaps to prepare for another attack, one based not on law but on more cunning schemes. The Tianlong group also went quiet. But I knew that giant machine was only paused, waiting for a signal. During that time, I did 2 things. First, I met with the restoration artisan A Jing had recommended. He was an elderly man named Master Fu, with skillful hands and a special reverence for ancient artifacts. I showed him the small corner of the wall I had tested. He only needed a glance before nodding. "Cinnabar mixed with lacquer," he said, "an ancient technique, very difficult to handle, but not impossible." We agreed that he would come on the day I called, bringing his full set of tools. Second, I received confirmation from old Zheng that the anonymous tip had worked. The Cultural Heritage Bureau had placed my address on a potential survey list. A team of experts would be dispatched soon. And then, the day I had been waiting for arrived. It was a winter morning, the sky gray and a north wind blowing. I was sitting in my study, cleaning my ink brush set, when I heard a commotion at the gate. This time, it wasn't just the sound of excavators. There were also luxury cars and the sound of cheerful chatter. I walked into the courtyard. The gate was wide open. Wang Bin stood there, beaming, flanked by several men in suits who looked like executives from the Tianlong group. The young lawyer was also present, and of course the demolition crew and the 2 excavators like 2 beasts of prey lying in wait. "Father," Wang Bin called out, his voice syrupy sweet, "today is a good day. I've renegotiated with Tianlong. They've agreed to increase the compensation by another 20%. This is the final and best offer. You see, I always have your best interests at heart." He held out a new contract. I didn't even glance at it. "I've already told you. I am not selling." Wang Bin's patience snapped. The smile vanished from his face. "Fine. You've left me no choice." He turned to the men from Tianlong. "Gentlemen, you see, he refuses to cooperate. But no matter, we have what we need." His lawyer stepped forward, brandishing a document with the court's red seal. "Mr. Wang, this is a court order granting us access to the property for the purpose of surveying and measuring as required by the preliminary contract. This order does not permit us to demolish, but it does permit us to enter. If you obstruct us, you will be held in contempt of court." I understood their plan immediately. They would use this order to enter the house and then create a fait accompli. They would start smashing things from the inside, or cause an accident, damaging the house to the point where complete demolition would be the only logical next step. "Very well," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. "Please, come in." Wang Bin and his entourage were taken aback by my easy compliance. They exchanged glances, then strode into the courtyard with the air of conquerors. "Start measuring from the main hall," Wang Bin commanded. "Wet," I said. Before you do anything, I have something I want to show all of you. In the study, curiosity won out. They followed me into the study. The room felt crowded with so many people. A dusty old room full of books and paper, one of the Tianlong executives remarked dismissively. I said nothing. I walked to the west wall and took down the landscape painting. All eyes were on me. This, I said, is the heart of this house. At that exact moment, the gate bell rang. Old Zheng walked in, followed by two people in the uniform of the Cultural Heritage Bureau. And finally, Master Fu, carrying a wooden toolbox. The color drained from the faces of Wang Bin and his lawyer. What are you doing here? Wang Bin stammered. We received a report about a potential significant cultural heritage site at this location, one of the officials announced formally. We are here to conduct a survey. Old Zheng smiled. What a coincidence. My client was also just about to reveal a secret his family has guarded for generations. All attention was now fixed on the wall. I gave Master Fu a nod. The old artisan nodded back, calmly opened his toolbox, and took out his small, delicate instruments. He began to work, carefully scraping away the outer layer of plaster. Wang Bin and his group stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Flakes of white plaster fell away. And then, the deep crimson of cinnabar began to emerge, growing clearer and clearer. The air in the room grew still. Everyone held their breath. Then, the first characters appeared. They were in the ancient Lishu script, powerful and full of spirit. Master Fu worked faster, as if guided by an unseen force. An entire wall of text gradually revealed itself before everyone's eyes. It was a poem, a 4-line poem, about the unyielding spirit of the pine and cypress trees in a storm. And below the poem, there was a line of smaller, but even more shocking, text. This residence, along with all the books within, I, Lin Zekian, hereby bequeath to posterity, with one sole condition, that it be preserved intact as a sanctuary for culture and the integrity of scholars. Any who seek to destroy it for personal gain shall be judged by heaven, earth, and history. Inscribed on a late autumn day, in the 20th year of the Daoguang Emperor's reign, and beneath it a crimson seal, still sharp and clear after nearly 2 centuries. A heavy, stunned silence enveloped the room. The two officials from the Heritage Bureau scrambled to take pictures, their mouths agape in awe. Incredible. This is the authentic handwriting of Censor Lin, a monumental discovery. Old Zheng stepped forward, his voice resonating through the room. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the legendary crimson ink wall. It is not just a piece of calligraphy. It is a historical last will and testament. It makes this house an indisputable cultural heritage site, protected by law at the highest level. I turned to look at Wang Bin. His face was as white as a sheet of paper. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead. He staggered, having to hold onto a chair for support. His lawyer dropped his briefcase on the floor. The Tianlong executives quietly began backing towards the door, their eyes now glaring at Wang Bin with anger and disgust. Their contract, their dream of the new Forbidden City complex. It had all turned to dust, right before a wall the color of crimson ink. Bin, I called out, my voice holding no triumph, only a profound sadness. Do you see now? There are things that money cannot buy and cannot destroy. He didn't answer. He just stared at the wall, at the defiant characters of the ancient official, as if they were judging his own empty soul. The battle was over. Not with a victory for me, but with a victory for history, for culture, and for the values that Mylan and I had always believed in. Wang Bin's downfall was swifter than I could have imagined. The crimson ink wall was not just a piece of historical evidence, it was a media bombshell. The very next day, news of the monumental discovery in an old Beijing Siheyuan spread like wildfire across newspapers and social media. Historians, calligraphy experts, and the public all turned their attention to my small alley. The house was immediately sealed by the Cultural Heritage Bureau for protection and further research. The Tianlong Group, desperate to avoid being implicated in a scandal of destroying cultural heritage, quickly issued a press release. They announced the cancellation of the new Forbidden City project, terminated all cooperation with Wang Bin's company, and offered a profound apology to me and the public. They had perfectly turned Wang Bin into their scapegoat. Investors who had poured capital into Wang Bin's project withdrew in unison. His company, built on a foundation of grand promises and fleeting connections, collapsed like a house of cards. Debt, lawsuits, and the abandonment of everyone he knew followed. Wang Bin, once a rising young entrepreneur, was suddenly a failure, an outcast despised by society. A week after the event, he came to see me. He was no longer wearing a designer suit or polished shoes. He wore an old jacket, his face was gaunt, his stubble unshaven. He arrived one evening as I was sitting alone in the courtyard, drinking tea under the moonlight. He said nothing, just stood at the courtyard gate, looking at me. I remained silent, gesturing for him to come in. He entered and sat down on the stone stool opposite me. We sat like that for a long time, with only the sound of the wind rustling through the bare branches. "I've lost everything," he finally said, his voice hoarse and empty. "Not everything," I replied. "You are still my son." He looked up, and in his eyes, for the first time in years, I saw no arrogance or calculation, only exhaustion and bewilderment. "Why? Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" "Because if I had told you, you would not have believed me," I said, pouring him a cup of tea. "You would have thought it was just a lie from a senile old man trying to keep his house. You needed to see it for yourself. You needed to be stopped by that very wall before you could understand." He took the teacup but didn't drink. The steam rose, blurring his face. "Mother, she knew all along, didn't she?" I nodded. "Your mother spent years researching. She knew the true value of this house. And she also knew the greed in your heart. She prepared everything, not to fight against you, but to protect you from yourself." Wang Bin began to cry. Not loud sobs, but silent tears that streamed down his cheeks. The tears of a man whose illusions had been shattered, who had realized the emptiness of his pursuits. "I was wrong, Father. I was so wrong." I offered no words of comfort. Sometimes, remorse must be experienced alone, without soothing. It is a bitter medicine, but necessary for healing. "This house," I said after a long while, "will no longer belong solely to our family. It will become a heritage of the city. But I have made a proposal to the authorities. I want to turn this place into a small cultural space, a place where people, especially children, can come to learn calligraphy, to learn about history, about old values. I want the legacy of Sensor Lin and your mother to live on." Wang Bin looked at me, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Father, you're staying here?" "I will stay for a while, to arrange everything. But after that, I am going to Dali." I looked up at the night sky, at the drifting clouds. "Your mother prepared a place for me there, a place where I can live my final years in peace. Would you like to go there, Bin? Not to escape, but to start over. There, no one knows who you are. You can find a normal job, live a simple life." He shook his head. "Number, I can't go. I must stay here. I have to deal with the consequences I've caused. I owe many people, and I owe Mother an apology." He stood up and bowed deeply before me. "Father, I am sorry. I will not trouble you anymore. When I can stand on my own 2 feet again, I will come find you." With that, he turned and walked out of the gate, his lonely, stooped figure casting a long shadow on the ground. I watched him go, my heart a mix of emotions. The ashes of a fantastical dream had settled upon his life, but in those ashes, I seemed to see a green shoot struggling to emerge. The green shoot of repentance. In the following months, I was busy turning my idea into reality. With the help of old Jung and the support of the government, the Lin Zekian study hall was established. I taught the classes myself, showing the neighborhood children their first brushstrokes. Looking at their innocent, focused faces as they ground the ink, I felt a pure joy I hadn't experienced in a long time. Mylan's legacy was not just in preserving the house, but in planting these cultural seeds in the next generation. I did not see Wang Bin again, but occasionally, I heard news of him from Mr. Li. He had sold his luxury apartment and car and had started over from scratch. He was working at a construction site, a job of hard manual labor. People said he had changed, had become keener, more humble. Li divorced him soon after his company went bankrupt. She could not endure a life without material wealth. Her departure was, perhaps, also a good thing for Wang Bin. One afternoon, after class had ended, I found a bouquet of white chrysanthemums placed quietly at the gate. There was no card, no message. But I knew who it was from. He hadn't come in. He wasn't ready yet, but he had come. I brought the flowers inside and placed them on Mylan's altar. "Lan," I whispered, "perhaps we didn't fail completely." I knew Wang Bin's road ahead was still long and arduous, but the green shoot had sprouted, and I had faith that one day it would grow into a sturdy pine tree, like the one in the poem on the crimson ink wall. For now, it was time for me to fulfill my final promise to Mylan and to myself. It was time to set off for the warmth of Yunnan. The one-way ticket to Dali rested in my coat pocket, feather light, yet it held the weight of a whole new chapter of my life. As I locked the gate of the Siheyuan for the last time, I felt no sadness or regret. I felt a sense of peace. The Lin Zekian study hall was up and running, the sound of children's laughter now filling the once empty courtyard. The legacy had found its inheritors. I had fulfilled my duty in Beijing. A Jing met me at the airport, with the same warm smile and unwavering sincerity. This time, I arrived not with the mindset of a refugee, but of someone coming home. The small house with its white walls and blue-tiled roof welcomed me with the fragrance of its garden and the brilliant golden sunlight of the highlands. Life in Dali unfolded gently, simply. I was no longer Lao Wang, the famous calligrapher embroiled in a family dispute. Here, I was simply old Mr. Wang, a new neighbor who enjoyed drinking tea and strolling by the lake. Every morning, I woke to the sound of birdsong. I would brew a pot of tea, take it out to the courtyard, and read a few pages of a book, or simply gaze at the majestic Kangshan Mountains changing colors with the light. In the afternoons, I often visited Jing's art studio. I no longer taught calligraphy formally. I would just sit there, occasionally offering guidance on a brushstroke to the young artists, sharing stories about art and life. Their creativity and energy gave me a new vitality. Jing was like a daughter to me. She took care of me thoughtfully but never made me feel like a burden. We would often go to the market together, cook, or take excursions to the ancient villages nearby. She told me about her life, about how my land had changed her destiny. Shifu didn't just give me money to learn a craft, Jing said one afternoon as we were boating on her high lake. She gave me confidence. She taught me that a woman can stand on her own 2 feet with her talent and dignity, without having to rely on anyone. I looked at her, and I saw Mylan's spirit in her. Not in her appearance, but in her essence. Mylan had left me more than a house. She had left behind living legacies like Jing, people who continued to spread her values and kindness. Occasionally, old Zheng would call to check in. He told me the study hall in Beijing was doing very well, with more and more parents wanting to enroll their children. He joked that I had become a living legend in the neighborhood. A year after I arrived in Dali, I received a letter. The handwriting was clumsy but tried to be neat. It was from Wang Bin. In the letter, he didn't talk much about his work or his hardships. He just said that he had started to practice calligraphy again. Every weekend he would go to the study hall, sit in a quiet corner, and practice his strokes. He said that when he held the brush, he felt his soul being cleansed. He told me he had read all the books about Lin Zekian and now understood what integrity meant. At the end of the letter he wrote, "Father, when the osmanthus tree in the courtyard blooms again, may I come to Dali to visit you. I will not come empty-handed. I will bring the piece of calligraphy I am most proud of to ask for your guidance." I read the letter over and over, my eyes blurring with tears. The green shoot from a year ago had finally grown. He had found his roots again, not in land or money, but in paper and ink. I wrote back to him immediately, just one short sentence. "I will be waiting for you, my son." That afternoon, I sat in my small courtyard in Dali. The sunlight was like golden silk, the air was fresh, and the flowers in the garden were blooming vibrantly. I lifted my teacup and took a deep breath of its fragrance. I had lost a beloved wife, had nearly lost a cherished home, and had almost lost my only son. But in the end, I had found them all again, in a different way. My land was still alive in my memories, in Jing's success, in Wang Bin's rebirth, and in every corner of this house. The Siheyuan still stood, not as property, but as a beacon of culture, illuminating the path for future generations. And Wang Bin was on a journey to find himself again. I smiled. The war was truly over. There were no winners or losers, only lessons learned and wounds that were slowly healing. And before me lay peaceful days under the Yunnan sky, a peace that Mylan and I had always longed for. The breeze from Erhai Lake blew gently, cool and fresh, carrying the scent of a new life. And this time I knew there would be no more storms.